Welcome back for another video about Microsoft Endpoint Manager, focus on Configuration Manager. So on the other videos, we already installed Configuration Manager, we installed SQL. Still lots of things to do on the SQL side that we are going to do throughout this series of videos. But now on the Configuration Manager, we need to start preparing Configuration Manager to be actually useful. Because right now, the server is there and that's it. There is not too much about that we haven't done. So we just install Configuration Manager, upgrade, and had a look on the console, but not much. Now it's time for us to start getting Configuration Manager where it's going to be useful. What I mean by that is we can install clients. Right now, we cannot even install clients. So the first thing I'd like to do, if I bring up the documentation here, is looking at what the roles or system roles that the Configuration Manager client needs. And the first one here, it talks about management point. And the second one that we are going to talk about in this video is distribution point. Both of those roles we can do during the installation of Configuration Manager, but we haven't done. So we are going to do now. Distribution point is a file server, basically. Anything related with files inside the Configuration Manager will require a distribution point. So for example, we're going to install a application on the client, let's say Google Chrome, Acrobat Reader, Firefox, Edge, whatever. We need to have the source files. And those source files, let's say Google Chrome.msi, Firefox.exe, AcrobatReader.exe, or whatever it may be, will need to be somewhere. And this somewhere will be in the distribution point. So the distribution point is the file share for Configuration Manager. So to install distribution point, we need to have some requirements. And this is the second documentation, site and site system prerequisites for Configuration Manager. So there is loads of stuff. One of those is, of course, .NET 4.8 that we already installed on the other servers. But here, if you scroll down a little bit, we have a distribution point and tells what whatever we need as distribution point. So the first one is the feature RDC, and then we also need the IIS with some specific extras being installed. And of course, VC++, but there is a here information say if this VC++ is not installed, Configuration Manager will install. Also, distribution point is not just a file server. If we look at OS deployment, it has some parts of the OS deployment, the PXE, and talks here about the PXE. We are not going to look at this right now. We will look at this when we install Configuration Manager. When we configure Configuration Manager for OS deployment. And of course, you can see there are a lot more. So the third one here is install and configure distribution points for Configuration Manager. So this documentation is a walkthrough exactly what is required when we configure distribution points. So there are some of those things we will just ignore because we are going to be configuring this at a later stage. And also there is a documentation for distribution points, installation, upgrade, and configuration. So it's a pretty extensive documentation. Everything that happens when you, for example, try to install a distribution point or try to upgrade. What is internal happening, where in the SQL, where in the logs we can see exactly things happening. So it tells you lots of logs here. For example, here on the SMSDB-mon, we will see those log lines. On the HageMan, we are going to see those log lines and so on and so forth. Finally, we need to understand how Configuration Manager file structure works. And this manage content actually tells you a little bit. So the installation, deploy, and monitoring. And because Configuration Manager is a network solution, we actually need to look at what's the ports that are required for Configuration Manager. If I search for distribution point, and I will ignore the cloud for a moment, we will look at the cloud distribution points at a later stage. But we can see here the client to the distribution point, we will be using port 8 if it's a HTTP, na HTTPS environment 443, and also if there is express updates, we will look at this when we look at express updates, we will be looking at port 8005. If we have a multicast, there is extra ports, Pixie, some extra ports, but if we look down, just scroll down here, connection between the distribution points and management points, we look at ports 8 and 443. And here on the site server to distribution point, we need the SMB and RPC ports as well, mainly RPC dynamic. So there are some firewalls we need to do. And of course, Configuration Manager server is connecting to the distribution point. So we will need to have a extra rights on that box. Also, cloud distribution point. If we don't want to have a on-prem distribution point on our environment, we can use this in Azure. So there is a good information here about this. I will not talk about the cloud as yet, because we are going to have a future video about the cloud stuff, or multiple videos about the cloud stuff. And here is how the communication between the endpoints work with the Configuration Manager. So you can see here what's the ports we actually will need. We already looked at this in the documentation, but SMB, HTTPS, HTTP, some extra information here about the site server to distribution point, and more information here. So if you use HTTPS or use HTTP, so there is a lot of more information here. So extra to that, we have network. The client is connecting to the server, or the site server is connecting to a remote configuration distribution point. So there are network involved, and if there is network, could be LAN or could be WAN, there are maybe restriction or a way to actually save bandwidth for something else. And this documentation actually explains how we can actually perform a scheduling, or throttling, what it means. Just between certain hours of the day, we copy data from the site server to the distribution point. So let's say overnight, where there is no business traffic. Or we can use a price stage content, where we are going to manually copy the data to the distribution point, instead of let the site server do that. There is some, of course, here information about that. And if everything goes wrong, what exactly we need to do to resolve problems? So here we have the troubleshoot content distribution, and basically we need to read logs. We already had a video about how to read logs with CMTrace. So we can see here, then we have, okay, we need to use this MGR log, or we could use or look at the PKFX for mgr.log. And there is a couple of informations here where and what you will be looking at on those logs. You can see here a similar output for example, in this one will be the PKGX for mgr. Okay, and there's loads of information that we can actually use. But with Configuration Manager and Distribution Point, there are multiple threads that can be used. For example, we are going to copy an application, but we may be able to copy 10 applications at the same time. Or the application has multiple files. Instead of copy one file, we could copy 3, 4 files at the same time. So if we have 10 applications and 5 files each time, we are copying 50 files in total at the same time. So this could speed up the whole process of copying data to distribution point at the same time, could cause problems with your network. So this is where then we need to have the balance. But this does explain how configuration manager uses threads for content distribution. And you can see here a nice picture, exactly what is happening, where it's going to happen, and you can see here we have options for threads as well. And it tells you where on the logs we are going to see this kind of information. And then we can actually, if we open, for example, multiple logs, we can start looking where things are happening at the same time. If we use Pixie, there is a big documentation on understanding Pixie, both in Configuration Manager, and then what the logs we are looking as well. And of course, depends on our network, we need to not have a standard distribution point where the configuration manager server copy data, but we can have also something called pool DP, where configuration manager copy to a distribution point, and that distribution point will copy the data to another distribution point, or the other distribution point will pull the data from another distribution point. Imagine that, for example, it depends also on your network. You have two servers on the same network, or two distribution points on the same data center, and the configuration manager server in a different data center. You don't want to copy the data twice through that network location. You can copy to one server, and then the other server picks up the data from the other distribution point. Could be a solution. And of course, everything is logs. So we have here log file reference, and if we scroll down here, we should see distribution point. Let me just search for it. Distribution point. So this is my client. So here we have this MGR. And if you scroll down, there is a few other packages. So the PKG-Xfer MGR that we already seen that name. But there are loads of other files that we may be required to look at, depends on what we are using. And here on the content management section of that, you can see here so many logs and where the logs are. So for example, could be on the site server, could be on pool DP, could be on the client. So it depends on where the log is. Finally, there are lots of options for distribution point. So here on this configuration options for site system roles in Configuration Manager, we can have here some, actually it's kind of index. So for distribution point, and you can see here we need to have the Configuration Manager, the IIS installed, and we have so many other things, and basically it's index for other websites that maybe I already showed you guys. And the last one, security. So by default, everyone will have rights. And if I just search here for distribution point, it talks about HTTPS, HTTP, how to protect, what you need to do in terms of if you let Configuration Manager to install, because if you just select one option, Configuration Manager will install a little bit more than just the distribution point. So you can see here that we need to remove some of the rows. And also securing the content. So there are a lot more than just, okay, let's install the distribution point and everyone will access. So some of those files may have encryption keys, may have passwords, or may even have serial keys that you don't want everyone to have access. So you may need to actually to cut down the security access. So I have talked a lot. There is so much to know about distribution point, and I haven't actually talked about everything on the distribution point because there is still a lot more, and we are going to see towards the videos. But that's it for this video. If you liked, leave your like, leave your comment, share with your friends. If you have questions, remember, use the hashtag AskRaphael on the comment section below. It's easy for me. If you have subscribed, thank you a lot. If not, subscribe to the channel and click that little bell icon so you will be notified every time I upload a new content. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next video.